With the second half of Zenless Zone Zero's version 1.2 arriving today, I asked you yet again what you want to know about ZZZ, Burnice, Caesar, Lucy or Piper, which questions you want to have answered, and I picked 9 questions from the community post and another one from our Discord server. And if you ain't part of our community yet, join us, a link to the Discord is in the description. Anyway, thank you for all the comments and questions, and well, let's start with the first one. Another creator gave mention to Roaring Right on Burnice, primarily due to its build-up rate bonus. Since it looks like most of her application is applied in short on-field bursts, does it matter much that this engine or others like it, for example Fusion Compiler, don't have long durations in their passives? So I will have to answer this question together with another one, which is popping up quite often, attack percent or anomaly mastery in slot 6. So first let's break down her anomaly application first. Against a fire weak enemy, a combo of Flame Blend into a full EX special channel will trigger burn guaranteed even with attack percent in slot 6. That also means getting additional anomaly build up is not necessary for this case. Furthermore, Roaring Right's effect only lingers for 5 seconds, which means it will affect a maximum of 2 to 3 afterburns depending on how fast you are with your inputs. The other 7 to 8 afterburns triggered while Burnice is off-field will not gain any of the bonuses provided by Roaring Right. However, these afterburns will still apply a good amount of anomaly, and the way the game works, every time anomaly is applied, it will snapshot your current relevant stats and add them to the pool of contribution. In the case of Afterburn, assuming 10 Afterburn procs, 20 to 30% of said contribution will gain the bonuses from Roaring Right, whereas the remaining 70 to 80% do not. 10 Afterburn procs will fill about 75% of the bar, at which point you usually want to switch back to Burnice anyway. What this essentially means, for about 50% of the total contribution, Burnice, and hence the burn as well, will not profit from Roaring Right's bonuses, and that will lower burn's damage, and the anomaly rate build up is also not enough to have Afterburn trigger a full burn by itself. She also does not necessarily need the anomaly mastery, as she is already extremely fast at applying burn. Up until now, we only looked at her EX special and Afterburn, so let's have a look at her ultimate and chain attack as well. As we can see, both of them fill the bar to about 65%. Now let's do the same with anomaly mastery in slot 6. Now we are at about 90%. If we were to have Roaring Right bonus and AM in slot 6, a single ult or chain would indeed trigger a full burn. However, that would also require that you have Roaring Right's bonus active at the moment of casting the respective skill. That is not impossible, but yet another piece of information to track and take care about. The actual question we have to ask ourselves is, does applying burn this fast actually help us? Does it advance our team? And well, the answer is yes and no. Even without Anomaly Mastery, Burnice will apply burn much faster than Jane will trigger assaults. This means for a Jane team, running Anomaly Mastery is actually not that efficient. You would actually get an additional disorder out of this for, if I remember correctly, the 5th burn. However, that would mean your overall damage dealt in your team is lower, at least until that point. And just running attack percent in slot 6 instead could actually be better. Piper can apply assault a little bit faster than Jane does, but she is gated by energy. And before I continue with Grace, because Grace can actually proc disorders much better and faster than assault users can, let's have a quick look at burn again. The other creator in question showed an about equal burn damage in his video, and for the very first burn that is actually pretty correct. But she will apply more than just one burn, and most of the time she will also spend the time off field. So here are 2 burns procced solely by her afterburn, on the left with her signature and on the right with an R5 Roaring Right. If we now divide 13,300 by 17,900, we get about 74.5%. If we now take into account that some burns will have higher and some burns lower contribution, we can safely assume that about 80% is not too far off the actual in-game value. For the sake of transparency, here is also the difference if the entire burn is applied on field by Burnice. So yes, for the very first burn, Roaring Right would win out, but it also loses massively for any subsequent burn where she spends a lot of time off field. This is also partially due to Burnice not having her signature buff active for the very first burn. So the TLDR to that question is, If you can constantly switch her in every 5 seconds to cast her EX special and maintain the buffs, Roaring Right would be a solid option. Do you also have the energy to cast her EX special every 5 seconds for at least 0.9 seconds for a chance at obtaining and well also maintaining all 3 buffs? Probably not. I hope that answers your questions. Up onto the next. Question 2. Regardless of damage, what team comp theoretically procs the most disorders per minute against a single target? This is where I want to connect back to Grace. A Grace Burnice team has probably the best disorder ratio, at least as of right now, but this also might change in the future. This is mostly because Assault is not that great for disorder, which is simply due to the higher amount of anomaly required to proc Assault, which is 20% more than other anomalies to be exact. Grace also allows for a bit more field time for Burnice than Jane does, so Burnice can actually make good use of Anomaly Mastery in this team, where a few basic attacks can massively help to trigger the next burn for Grace without needing to spend energy on Burnice. Some people, including you, have promoted Crit Burnice, but I believe this to be a mistake. Hoyo tends to assume you build a character a certain way, then synergize future units with this in mind. So for example, disorder bonuses for Burnice, which you will brick by building Crit. What do you think about this? Well, since I did indeed promote Crit Burnice, it would be weird for me if I didn't think that it would have its place. But that's exactly it. It has its place, a niche within mono fire teams or possibly non-disorder teams, which I hopefully also made quite clear in my guide. To quote my answer in the community post, I do not think that Crit Burnice is ever a good choice for anomaly disorder teams. It is solely a working playstyle within non-disorder and even more so mono fire teams. The fact that the available mono fire teams are just straight up worse than her disorder team options do not help Crit Burnice to become better. However, if you were to play Burnice in a mono fire team, Crit Burnice will outperform a full AP Burnice, which is largely due to the fire anomaly contribution from your other teammates. What I mean by that is basically playing full AP Burnice within a mono fire team is griefing unless all of your other fire units are also built for AP. And usually Soldier 11, Collider, Ben and Lucy are, well, not built for full anomaly proficiency. Also, people do not realize yet that a Crit Burnice afterburn can easily proc for 80 to 100k damage per proc, and hitting a million damage from afterburns alone per Burnice rotation is indeed very possible. For reference, a full AP burn from Burnice will do about 780k if no dilution is assumed over the same time frame of 13 seconds. Point being, Crit Burnice is a viable way of playing her within a mono fire team, and more importantly can utilize the Inferno metal pieces from the likes of Soldier 11 or Crit Lucy, which could save you on a few resources for farming her new set. Does that mean Crit Burnice is the best possible way of playing her? No, obviously not. It also doesn't mean that it will stay a viable way of playing her. But as of right now, at least it is an option I wanted to show, even if mono fire teams will not perform at the same level as her disorder options. And as seen in the showcase on my Burnice guide, a team of main DPS Lucy, Crit Burnice and Collider can easily clear Shio Disputed 8 in under 1 minute, hell even in 40 to 50 seconds. That, at least to me, screams viable, even if it is not the most optimal way of playing her. How does Disorder interact with enemy element resistances? If it ignores them, then Burnice is kind of OP and can help brute force enemies with resistance? Well, I have bad news for you. No, Disorder does not ignore enemy resistance, its damage is always based on the consumed element. Means if the enemy is affected by burn and we trigger assault on the enemy, burn will be consumed and disorder will deal damage based on the remaining time of burn, and for the purpose of your question, does indeed take the enemy fire resistance into account. That also means proccing disorder as fast as possible after the first anomaly has been applied will increase the damage dealt by said disorder. Why go Burnice Grace Lucy over Burnice Grace Seth? To be honest, there is no real reason to take one over the other unless your Lucy is maybe M6. Lucy will buff both Burnice and Grace, and both Grace and Burnice can trigger Lucy's M6 spores pretty regularly, which can make up for Grace not having her additional ability. However, Seth is also a viable option and both are honestly pretty close to each other. If you have Seth built or simply prefer him over Lucy, he is a good choice. Seth also helps a lot more with additional anomaly build-up for both. Are there any calcs done to determine AP to attack weight, how much attack is equal to AP point, after you meet the 300 requirement for example? Honestly, that is an extremely difficult question to answer, as it is very unit dependent, player dependent, and in general there are so many different variables you have to take into account for this. As a general guideline, prioritizing attack over AP after 420 anomaly proficiency is a good rule of thumb. That applies to Burnice as much as other anomaly units. In your opinion, what are the strongest two teams right now, with or without Burnice, without overlap? Okay, big disclaimer for this one. This is my personal opinion and feeling on which two teams are the strongest. I have no data nor calcs to back this up, nor have I looked at any stats on sites like Crit Burnice. In my opinion, Jane, Rina, Seth or Jane, Rina, Caesar are probably the strongest anomaly team right now, even if it will give you ADHD if you didn't have it yet. Sujuan, Chingy and Nicole are the other team I would set my money on. Actually, I would be interested in that as well. Which two teams do you think fare the best up until now? How will that change after Burnice releases? Let me know in the comments below. When running Lucy with Burnice, what is the best way to build Lucy herself? Obviously enough attacks to max out the boost, but if I remember correctly, her boars can inherit her crit stats, anomaly and even impact. That is a very interesting question, and I want to answer that by forwarding you to another YouTuber. Neckfrog actually did a video on that, and I recommend you to check that one out. Also read the pinned comment on the video, because that is my take as well. Actually, why not? Let's do this together. Having thought about it a bit more, I'm probably going to walk it back on the thought that the contribution to burn could compete with Lucy's personal damage with a full crit build. I think the right recommendation is to stick with Crit Lucy, but keep an eye out for AP subs. This has an added bonus of keeping your Lucys relevant on other teams outside of Anomaly. Regardless, please, I do recommend you to check out his video, go and subscribe for him. You always want the full context and not just take something out of context like I did here. Go and watch his vid, like and sub if you haven't yet. What do you think of stunners as the third slot in a Burnice and Jane team? I think Chingy Collider and Lighter when he arrives could all be solid replacements for a support or defenses unit, since Jane already relies pretty heavily on chain attacks for passion upkeep and stun windows for those big damage numbers. So stunners are always an interesting spot to evaluate. By adding a stunner to your team, you are usually trading a little bit of damage for a faster stun, which in turn increases your damage again. Some characters have most of their damage loaded into one or two big abilities, for example Corrin or Piper, and some have a more consistent damage output, for example Soldier 11. So the question here becomes, which of these playstyles do Jane and Burnice fit into? Let's start with Burnice, who deals consistent damage over time and hence appreciates any buff she can obtain, but that also means for Burnice itself, she is much less reliant on stuns. At least in theory, because her ultimate and chains do apply a huge amount of anomaly and her ult grants her heat as well. Chains also generally generate a good amount of decibels, which means that she still does appreciate stuns. For Jane though, she does basically no damage outside of assault, and boosting these assault numbers becomes extremely valuable in terms of her total damage output. Furthermore, as you correctly assessed, her chain and ult refill her passion state. So at least in my opinion, playing a Jane comp with a stunner is the better choice. However, I also do not think that makes non-stunner comps unviable for her. And for the last question, I obviously kept the most important and necessary question for the end. Who's your mummy, Caesar or Yanagi? Easy answer, none. But since you told me to pick one, Caesar, I really don't care much about Yanagi outside of her meta relevancy. And with that said, before I get cancelled for not liking Yanagi, let's end the video here. Thank you so much for your questions, thank you for watching, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Zenless Zone Zero content and their guides, join the Discord if you haven't yet, and I wish you a great day. Peace.